As the 2026 local government elections approach, political parties have started naming their prospective mayoral candidates. The Democratic Alliance will this morning announce theirs for the city of Johannesburg. The city has seen a revolving door of mayors, with 4 taking office since Mpho Phalatse's ousting in 2023. The city has also been in the spotlight for allegations of poor management, service delivery issues, as well as ailing municipalities. Let's now take a look at what kind of leadership is needed for the efficient running of a city with the head of state reform program at the Public Affairs Research Institute with Dr. Seri Meny-Gibert. Dr. Gibert, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. So, like I mentioned, we are going to be seeing a lot of political parties putting out their mayoral candidates. How should these political parties approach their candidate selection in order to ensure that they prioritize qualified and community-focused leadership for the city of Johannesburg?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, one hopes that the parties will have an eye on the fact that the cities of Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni and Tshwane, are major drivers or can be major drivers of the economy. I mean, the budget of the city of Tshwane, for example, is, equivalent to Transnet's. The combined budget of all of these 3 cities is something like 200 billion rand. And we've tended to prioritize national level politics in our debates. And then I think in terms of who parties tend to deploy to top positions, it's often the national that takes preference. And I think that that's got to change. I think local government's got to be seen as the most important site for sending your most qualified cadre. Ideally, we want to see candidates that can handle that kind of enterprise, this sort of massive scale of cities today, and have the sort of technical understanding of that environment, and essentially be developmentally focused and not have priorities, other kinds of priorities like rent seeking and patronage. The thing is, though, that pressure has to come from voters. Parties have to feel that that's what voters really will vote for. So when they're thinking about their candidate selection, do they think the voters are impressed by people with real know-how and expertise, to take up a position of mayor and to provide political direction? Or do they think the voters are actually going to be more attracted by something else? So, it's a test of the strength of our democracy, I think. But I also think that we need to keep an eye on the position of city manager. You said just recently we've seen a revolving door of mayors, and it's very likely we're going to see that for a long time. I think our coalition politics will remain quite unstable. So I think it's really important to think about how we stabilize the bureaucracy, and how we develop a layer of really professional senior leadership. So we also need to give attention to how these coalition governments, once they're in, how they're choosing their city manager, their top candidate to run the bureaucracy. And at the moment, I think there's far too little spotlight on that. I also think we need to give a lot of attention to how we're choosing board members. A city like Johannesburg is run through essentially municipal entities. Refuse removal, electricity, water, these are all run through, structured through companies, and service delivery happens through companies. So who's on that board really matters. And I think that the bar has been set far too low. And I think that there are ways we can improve those processes, and I think the public needs to start watching those processes really closely. We've been supporting the Johannesburg Crisis Alliance with their development of proposals for how they would like to see these candidates chosen. And if you go to their website, you can see those proposals. Much better transparency in those processes, not just what is the final outcome of those interviews for board members, but who gets to sit on selection panels, who gets to make these massive choices with massive implications for the way our cities are run.
Right. You speak about ensuring that the most qualified officials are the ones that take up some of these positions. And in last week's ANC roll call of ward councillors, the ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, was speaking about ensuring that you get local government experts that are occupying these positions in order for service delivery to happen in the way that it should. Are there any cities that maybe you could think of in terms of an example that are ensuring that the city manager that is placed and some of those boards that make some of these decisions are made up of people with that right expertise? Doctor, are you still with us? All right, it seems as though there is a bit of a connection problem. Oh, there we do have Doc. We've got you now back, Doc. Sorry.
We've got some good decisions. I think
All right, we are seeming to have a connection problem there with Dr. Sarah Meny-Gibert speaking to us about choosing the right candidates in order for a city to be run efficiently. All right, let's move on to the story. Hopefully we'll be able to get her back on the line now. Parliament and residents are calling on the city of Johannesburg to focus on the root causes of water disruption in the city. They say the metro, like many municipalities in Gauteng, is not dealing with water leaks and maintenance or running an efficient billing system. Johannesburg Mayor Dada Morero appeared before Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Water and Sanitation yesterday. Newzroom Afrika's Meny-Gibert has those details.
Following weeks of dry taps in Coronationville and Westbury, residents took to the streets demanding water. Johannesburg Mayor Dada Morero was summoned to Parliament to account for the recent protest fueled by water frustrations.
The day after we had left the area, we started realizing an improvement in as far as supply of water in the area. So between the 7 days that we had committed, there was a lot of improvement that was experienced by the communities. Even yesterday, in a public meeting with communities, they did confirm that indeed improvement was witnessed.
Water experts told lawmakers that Gauteng municipalities are failing to carry out basic responsibilities.
The key point, Chairperson, is that Rand Water is supplying sufficient water to Gauteng municipalities to meet their needs if they were to reduce the leaks in their distribution systems and invest more in their distribution infrastructure, including storage and pumping capacity.
Water Minister Phemi Majudina admitted that there are infrastructure challenges, but the municipalities must know how to monetize water resources.
The root cause of supply disruptions, including demand exceeding the supply in many instances, as well as load shedding, breakdowns, and old infrastructure. You might not say load shedding, may say load reduction, but it does one and the same in terms of the capacity to pump water. The unacceptable levels of non-revenue, leaks, unbilled and unpaid water.
Johannesburg Mayor warned residents that the summer is coming with further water restrictions. This will help manage water consumption throughout the hot season. For Newzroom Afrika on Channel 405, I'm Meny-Gibert in Johannesburg.
All right, let's go back to our discussion where we're looking at political parties as they've started naming their prospective mayoral candidates. And we are asking what kind of leadership is needed to efficiently run a city. We are joined by Dr. Sarah Meny-Gibert, who is a Political Affairs Research Institute director. Thank you so much for coming back, Doc. We were speaking about you just giving us examples of those cities that have elected people within some of those executive structures that are able to make the right decisions in order to deliver services to those communities.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that we do have some cities run by very able city leaders. I mean, I think Tshwane is chosen a city manager with long experience in running cities. I think Cape Town has as well. And I think there are also very many, there are good members on our boards. It's just we don't have enough of them in Johannesburg. And I think that also we need to engender public confidence in those processes, which is why I was talking about the importance of the public knowing more about how board members are chosen, so that there is a greater confidence that that the city can start to put the water crisis, at centre stage and begin to fix it. So I think it's not just about, the city feeling that it has the best candidates. It's also about understanding how important it is to communicate with the public. I recently saw a circulating pamphlet showing that the city had increased electricity by this amount, and it had increased the sort of people on the indigent register by this amount, except the public wasn't told, what the ultimate aim was. We were just given a couple of figures of, 16,000, for example, have been added to the indigent register to benefit from a subsidy from the government for the poor. But meanwhile, the government had transferred enough money for 1 million people to be on that register. So I think we as public public need to get more savvy in demanding more from city management and how it communicates with the public and the goals it's setting itself.
And where do you think is the disconnect between the public and that information that they need to have in order for them to be able to hold the city accountable?
I think there is a need for more sort of basic proactive putting of information on the website and that kind of thing. But I think it's also about trying to reinvigorate the IDP process. You know, the IDP was supposed to be a space where communities come together and deliberate with officials and politicians to start shaping the developmental plan and thinking about how to allocate the budget. And I think that process no longer works properly, and it's a one-way information session in which the city gives a bit of information to citizens. And, you know, I think that there are a lot of very committed ward councillors out there who are working exceedingly hard. And I think ward councillors bear the brunt often of community frustration. So, you know, to be very clear on that. But I think that IDP process really needs to be invigorated. It is supposed to be the place where the city and the public talk together, not just are given a bit of information.
The management of resources is also quite a big issue when it comes to running a city. What mechanisms do you think can be implemented to strengthen municipal financial management and also just to reduce the risks of corruption?
I think there are a few things. I mean, there are reforms happening spearheaded by the National Treasury with local government on municipal trading reforms. So, you know, how do we manage those big entities and their budgets and their revenue? Do we ring fence or not, and so on? I think those are really important. I think centrally, though, we have to get our procurement system working properly. So much of how the state delivers these days is through how it contracts. And our procurement system is enormously inefficient. And as you mentioned, it's enormously subject to corruption. And I think there's a lot of room, again, for us to think about making certain processes more transparent, especially, you know, citizens have a right to know, you know, who gets contracted for the delivery of water tankers and what expectations are there, and knowing what commitments the city is holding those companies who deliver those water tanks to, and that kind of thing. So I think that one of the big areas must be a focus on procurement and getting those systems to work better and to make them less subject and open to corruption.
And I guess also just intergovernmental coordination in terms of how it can be improved to ensure integrated planning as well as service delivery across Johannesburg's diverse communities.
That's right. Especially, infrastructure. I mean, you know, a large part of the crisis we're facing in Johannesburg is essentially an infrastructure crisis. It's a long, complex history of not having invested in infrastructure and the maintenance of it. And the water delivery problems we see are primarily linked to that. And that is going to need national and local government working very closely together, but also properly ring fencing maintenance budgets. And again, getting the procurement system working so that that maintenance happens properly and efficiently.
And are we using enough data-driven decision-making mechanisms in terms of ensuring that the city planning and the resource allocation is done correctly?
Possibly. I mean, I'm sure that could be improved. My sense is that the problem with planning is not principally a data problem. My sense is that, and we've been doing research on coalition government over the last few years in Gauteng, and the churn that we see at council level, I mean, as you said, you called it a revolving door of mayors, the changes we're seeing on council, you know, the positions of MMC for finance, whatever, the fact that those change, the city doesn't have long time horizons to do proper planning. You know, you can make one decision, lay down a budget, and then there's a new set of councillors, and those plans can change, the budgets can change, the priorities change. And that's a major problem. For a city of this size, you need a long time horizon to make decisions and plan for those, and to be able to have certainty so that you can lay down the right plans and also get the right kind of investment for infrastructure, public-private partnerships, etc. And that needs a degree of stability. So we've got a real challenge there. I think thinking about how we can stabilize coalition government, or more whether that's through regulation or whether it's through the public demanding more of its politicians for stable council, is fundamental to that. Planning requires a more stable coalition government, and it requires a more stable senior leadership level in the administration.
Do you foresee that stability in the near future, particularly for Johannesburg?
I have to confess, I'm not sure I do. I think that there would have to be new pressures for that to happen. I mean, the Department of Cooperative Governments, DCOG, has got a bill out that it's developed, which makes some, I think, quite sensible proposals for trying to stabilize coalition government more. You know, it limits how much you can bring votes of no confidence and, you know, makes sort of more exacting the conditions under which you can bring those motions of no confidence. So I think those are important. And I hope that we deliberate and get those sort of changes through Parliament soon. But as I say, I think ultimately that pressure has to come from the voters. The voters have to be very clear they're expecting more of their politicians.